Advisors, stop scrolling and lean in. Today's guest believes generosity isn't just a virtue, it's gravitational force that holds our planet, our relationships, and our businesses together. He's the founder of New Dimensions International, the author of The Searching for Father, and the living proof that life is for living and it starts with giving. So please welcome Mark to the show. Mark, it is great to have you on The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi. Take a moment to say hello and share how giving has become the core element of everything you do.
Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? And I just wanted to say one thing, Stacey. The accolades and marvelous reviews that you received, which really speak to wisdom, authenticity, and consistency. Those are tremendous character traits, and I loved listening to your podcast and everything. So I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be here, and I mean that from my heart. So, but let me just kind of jump right in and talk a little bit about who I am and where I've been. So I was born and raised in Southern California. I'm one of five siblings. So I have a brother 10 years older than me, a brother 8 years older than me, a brother 5 years older than me, and a little sister that was 3 years younger than me. In 1964, and my mom and dad left for dinner one evening, and about 15 minutes from our home, they were both killed tragically. And so life became really kind of scary, to be quite honest, for an 8-year-old. My mother's mother, who was 64 and widowed at the time, came and pleaded with the courts to keep us all five together, and the courts agreed with that. And so I had a wonderful grandmother who made a huge impact on me. But, I read an Irish quote some time ago that said, Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Giving leaves a memory no one can steal." And so my fondest memories of my grandmother are she was a giver. She would do anything for anybody. And she really had a tremendous ability to help me. Maybe more so than my other siblings. My two older brothers were pretty set on where they were going to go, what they were going to do in life. My brother, just older than me, this tragedy was difficult for him. Um, but my grandmother was really trying to help me say, don't let old hurts get in the way of happy new beginnings. She had a lot of really kind of, born in 1899 on a farm, no running water, no electricity, no indoor plumbing, hard worker, disciplined. But she had a lot of, I would be frazzled about things in life, and she could see it in me, and she'd say, "Mark, the sun's going to come up tomorrow morning." And really what she was saying was, there's a better way tomorrow. Forget about today. It's over. It's done with. And Alexander Graham Bell, I think, said, when one door closes, another one opens. So he then goes on to say, but we look so long and regretfully upon the closed door that we don't really see the one that's open for us.
Yeah.
And so I began to live kind of a life that was I needed to hang tough when the going gets rough, right? It was just a lot of uncertainty for me. Um, and so I think the other thing that impresses me from my grandmother was, kind of the notion that everything you love will probably be lost. But in the end, she used to say, love will return in another way. And so I do think that that's an important piece of what I want to share. What I found as a result of my book, right? And it's Searching for Fathers, a Son's Pursuit for a Father's Presence, how how ordinary men become extraordinary guides. And I found as a result of these extraordinary men in my book that very little is needed to make life happy. It's all about, and it's all within yourself. And so they gave me the ability, as you walk through the book, it's a chronological order of when I was 8.5, started meeting a friend of my dad's, and working all the way to present day. These men have helped me see, know, understand, experience, and live that truth in my way of thinking. Because I came to a conclusion early in life, life is neither good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And to
Mhm.
me, that's an important piece. Life really revolves around here and what you do and who you are. And I think
Mhm.
it's become even more pronounced, maybe in the last 3 or 4 decades, because the more high tech the world becomes, the more people crave high touch, right? we have a world that's yearning for interdependence on other things, right? So
Hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about the Earth, the universe, the cosmos that we live in, because uh, we don't live on Earth. We live in and with and through Earth. And that's a key concept, and I'll tell you why. Because it's an interdependence element that's not optional. The Earth
Right.
doesn't give because we deserve it. It gives to us because giving is what life does. And
Right.
I want to help us understand that our whole life in this world, the earth gives us everything we need. It gives us everything we need. And here's what's amazing, right? So the snow and the rivers and the lakes, they don't drink all the water they produce. And the plants, the vegetation, the fruits, the vegetables, they don't consume what they produce. And even flowers, they don't suck in all the aroma. The
Right.
sun and the moon provide light, and the stars and the galaxy provide understanding and light for us to see all that we need to see in this world. And the power of all that for me is that they give. They just give and they give. And even though we can mess things up, they still continue to give. They're they're that type they're that type of element that we need to understand and we need to think about because now today for me my life is my intent and purpose in life is making a difference through habitual giving.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody needs to make that their habit, right? Because we are what we repeatedly do. And so greatness in this life or excellence in this life is not an action, it's a habit.
Yeah.
Um, so you make your life meaningful by applying the meaning of giving. And
Right.
so early in my 20s, I kind of came up with a um, connotation that I live by, right? But it's doing for others what no one else is willing to do. Um,
Hmm.
because I do think things determine the quality of your mind. And
Yes.
that to me is just an absolutely critical component. So that's really what the book is all about. It's all about giving. And the more you give, I think the more you receive. I just
Hmm.
think that it's not a perplexity about life, but what you do is because of who you are, and who you are comes back to you.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate. I was blessed beyond, no, really blessed beyond words because none of these men in this book was really somebody I was seeking. They were
Yeah.
people that I encountered. So there's friends, there's family, there's neighbors, there's school teachers, there's college professors, high school professors, bosses that I worked for throughout my career, and just a variety of different people that had an influence on me. And what did they do? They made Mark a better Mark. So,
Yeah.
so that's kind of the whole gist of it. I got the best of the best from these men who really were just beyond what I would say was reasonable to do in any. And so I can jump in and just give you one example,
Yeah.
an early get-go. So in junior high, I am a skinny little scrawny kid. I mean, literally, I was skin and bones, right? If I turned sideways and stuck out my tongue, I looked like a zipper. I mean, and I got mocked by that and made fun of by that. And people were always on me. But I would show up to PE class every day and I would dress like everybody else. I was always the last one to be picked and I never got to play. And I think Coach Holland, saw something in my character that he wanted to help. So
Hmm.
I come into, it's my first year of junior high, but I come in, it's like maybe the third month of school. And he comes up to me at the beginning of class and he says, "Hey, I got something for you to do today, different from everybody else. So meet me out in the field. I'll be out there in a few minutes." So I walk out to this huge field at the back of our junior high. Uh, and he starts striding towards me and he's got I don't know, three or four golf clubs in one hand and a little bag. And he puts the golf clubs down and drops some balls. And he says, "Now I'm going to show you how to golf." And he says, I think you have potential. I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, I think you have potential because golf doesn't really require strength or prowess or size or skill or ability. Golf is really all about being able to practice regularly, because practice doesn't make perfect, Mark, but practice makes permanent. And he says,
Yes.
and you can develop a skill here. And I said, okay. We went through some things. Anyway, I it became my habit. I would walk to his office. I'd get the clubs. I'd get the balls. I'd go out in the field, and he would come out and he would, he would work with me, spend maybe 10 minutes with me, and then he'd go back to the rest of the class. When the session ended, I saw everybody going in. I'd collect everything. I'd bring them back, drop them off. The shocking fact, and this is really shocking, is at the end of that school year, he brought me a set of clubs. And he said, "These are for you, Mark. I'm giving these to you." Now, there's some responsibility. There's some work and dedication that you're going to have to do. But he set me up, met me the very first Monday after school was out, met me at a little 9-hole chip and putt, introduced me to the owner and the guys that worked there and a couple of men that were there. And he says, "You show up here regularly and you work on this. These people are good people. They'll help you." I never saw him the rest of the summer. We didn't have any money. My dad, great guy, but he was a pastor. He didn't make a lot of money. We didn't own the home we lived in. Uh, the car they died in was totaled. So we had a 19, I don't know, 54 Chrysler was the only thing he left for us, a value maybe. So I started working at like 10 years old. I would mow lawns in the neighborhood. I would weed. I would sweep. I would rake. Whatever you wanted me to do something, I'd do it, for anything, right? Because we just didn't have the money. So I was throwing 2 paper outs, and I would throw my paper outs every day and then take off on my bike to the golf course, and I would stay there until almost dusk. And so this is the apex moment. I come back to school the following year, and coach sees me. It's not even class time, and he says, "Hey, I'm looking forward today to you showing me what you've done." I'm like, "Okay," and but I was prepared. And so I came out and he walked out maybe 15 minutes after the class started and he says, "Okay, let me make a short shot, then make a medium-sized shot, make a long shot, right?" And so I hit the ball, hit the ball, hit the ball. He was like, "Man, is that impressive?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't, not definitely not on the course. I can hit it, but I'm not sure I always make it where it go. Anyway, he was very, very affirming. And then he said the words, "Mark, I am so proud of you." And I didn't get that much from my grandma. I'm not saying she didn't love me. I'm not saying she didn't care, but she never really saw everything that I had to do at home was responsibility, right? I was the only kid I knew that went to school who had to make my bed every morning before I left. Because if you
Right.
didn't, man, whew, there was a price to pay when you walk back in that door in the afternoon, right? So, so my grandmother, she really taught me discipline, consistency, all of that. But these men were special men. And so he ends up really helping me. He introduces me to the high school golf coach who wants me on the team emphatically. By the time I go to high school, I could go to any public course in Southern California, honest to goodness truth, and par that course as a 10th grader. And people were amazed sometimes at the shots I would make, like, "Wow, how do you do that?" I said, "You spend a lot of time hitting balls and figuring out how do I do that right again and again and again and again." So the only other thing I want to say here is there's a quote in here from Winston Churchill that I think is profound. It says, "To each there comes in their lifetime a special moment when they are figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to do an incredibly special thing, unique to them and fitted for their talents. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for what could have been their finest hour." And all I can say is, I got to walk with these men in their finest hour. Every story is an opportunity for me to stand and learn and grow and develop, and it's priceless. You can't put a price on any of that.
No, you can't. That's wonderful. Now, you say given is the very energy that powers our Earth and our solar system. What was the moment that revelation hit you, and how did it change the way you led and lived?
It kind of became like, so my father was a pastor, kind of came from some of my upbringing, but really in studying the Bible, I was really working through that process of, God creates things for 6 days. At the end, he creates man after everything else is all said and done. So all of that was designed for us. because and here's this is the epic moment. So people listen to me for just a second. Everything in the world does what it does because it has to, by design, right?
Yes.
You can't plant an orange tree in your backyard, and the orange tree isn't sitting out there saying, "Oh, give me an apple out there. I'd like to do pears this year. Let me just see." That doesn't happen, right? All those things do what they do because they have to do that. There's no
Yes.
option for them. The sun can't come up tomorrow and say, "I'm really burned out on being hot. I'm going to chill for a while," right? And none of that happens, right?
Right.
But then he makes man, and man gets a choice. And this is the remarkable thing that we have in this world. We have this choice to
Yes.
do good
Yes.
or do bad, right?
Right.
Or do nothing. But we
Right.
have the choice. And so that was kind of an epic moment in my life. Um, and it really drives home in a story in the book from Emmett. So I worked in Sequoia National Forest for a summer, 5 months at a
Hmm.
camp there. And there was a gentleman who was in his probably in his early 80s, 81, 82. And I know he's over 80, but he made signs for the park, bathroom this way, Lodge A, Lodge B, Lodge, anyway. So, and I had this passion to work with wood. And so I only got one day a week off, and I would go over and wander in, and we'd start talking, and he'd say, "Here, you want to do this? Here, you want to do that?" And just a great guy. Just had a wonderful time with him. And about halfway through the summer, he said to me, "Mark, I think you should write your eulogy." And I was kind of perplexed. I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, I've written mine." I said, "Well, Emmett, time is of the essence for you. That's probably something pretty practical." But I said that he laughed with me and said, "Ah, that's funny, that's funny." But he said, "No, he said, I wrote, somebody advised me, and so I want to give this to you. I wrote my eulogy when I was about your age." And he says, "I think it'll be powerful for you." I said, "Okay." So I left and I went home and I put some bullets down of what do I want people to say or think. Um, and so I came back and 2 weeks later, I gave him the thing. I said, "Hey, it's good, good. I like it. You're thinking, right?" He says, "But I don't think is this really what you want to be? Or is this really what you think people will value that you could be or might have been?" Right. And so I said, "Yeah, I don't." He said, "Yeah, you go back and think about what you're adamant, you're resolute about this is what they will say. And
Yeah.
everybody will know that in the room because they
Mm.
know you. Because what you want to end up being is who you are, not what you hope to be." And so I went back and I worked on that and I did put some time into it. I told him, I said, "This is becoming much more of work." And he says, "Yeah, that's life, right? You work, right? You work at things, you work at things, you work at things. Like I work at signs and you work on signs with me." And I said, "Okay." So I brought it back. He read through it. He says, much better, much better. Not that I'm judging you, but much better because I think now you're hitting the essence. He says, "Now here's the value, Mark. Every time you have a major decision to make in life, you go back and read this. And if what your decision says isn't in this, you don't do it."
Wow.
And I walked away like I walked away just kind of blown away. That kept going through my mind, all the way back to because I left there and I went to the dinner place where we had dinner every night as staff, and I couldn't get off of that subject. But there's truth here to be had, right? And
Yes.
I've actually rewritten it when I got married. I began to change in some when I had children. Now I have grandchildren. So but a huge, huge, huge blessing. I mean, a gift beyond gifts, right? You just
Yeah.
you can't, again, priceless, right? He didn't have to share that with me. And I spent a good portion of my career doing training. And this is grocery store training. So these aren't people that are typically highly educated. The grocery industry is starved for educated staff.
Yeah.
But I gave people this as a project in some of the courses I taught, right? And same scenario, people come back and say, "Well, why would I do that?" And then when you tell them, "Here's the value," man, it takes people to another place, right? Because now all of a sudden they start thinking, "Wow, here's wisdom, here's truth, and here's what it'll do for me." So I do think, those kind of episodes, those kind of opportunities are just they're priceless, but they're invaluable. And because of those experiences, I am who I am, and today I'm able to give um, freely. That's the nice thing about it. There's no charge for anything I do. It's all free.
I
And
love
I think the one thing I do want to add here is becoming a giver is synonymous with being yourself. It's precisely that simple, but it's that difficult, right? Um,
yes.
because because life is complicated. It's for me, much of life is paradoxical, and
Mhm.
so it, it it's difficult at times, but it's simple at times. But this whole thing about change in your life, you can bring about substantial change. I've taken all the tests about what kind of person I am and how I behave typically, and how you know, and all that's good and well. But I worked on a PhD for a while, and one of the projects I had in one of my capstone classes was to say, okay, if all these things tell you and they're accurate, they're honest and truthful, then where's the hope in the future of life? If
Yeah.
I am who I am today, and that's all there is now, where's the hope for that? So
Right.
I did a study that said, are you able to change yourself based on what people say these are the core elements of who you are? And you'll always be that way. I don't believe that. I don't
Hmm.
believe that. I believe as you walk through life, there are opportunities in many, many ways to do many, many other things beyond what you could wildly dream,
Yeah.
because opportunities are there if you're willing to move with that, right?
Yes.
And but that's work, and a lot of people don't like to hear that word, right? My kids heard a lot of things from me in life, right? 5 P's: proper planning prevents poor performance, right? You want to
Right.
perform well. You want to perform well as a father. You want to perform well as a husband. You want to perform well as a spouse, a friend, an employee, a social activist. You have to
Yeah.
work at all that stuff, right?
100%.
Thomas Jefferson had a young newspaper guy come and interview him. I used to live near where Thomas Jefferson's home was when I lived in Jersey, so I was enamored with him and studied him for a while. But this young man came in and said, "So tell me what you've been working on these days." He says, "I'm working on this thing called the incandescent light." And he says, "Really?" He says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, how's it going?" He goes, "Well, I've done 2018 different experiments, and I don't have it yet." And the young man said, "You failed 2018 times?" And the story says he jumps up, slams his hands on the desk, and leans into the son, or leans into the young man and says, "I have not failed. I now know 2,001 or 1,200, 100, whatever the number I said was,
Yeah.
ways it will not work," right? And so
Right.
there's the ever hopeful optimist who he does create the light bulb. And that's the most dynamic thing in the last century. The light bulb changed the world
Did.
because everything worked from sun up to sundown, and that was it. It stopped right there, and it
Yeah.
changed the world. He was a brilliant guy, and he brought brilliance to our life, literally through the light, right? I mean, so anyway, I but that means a lot to me because you need to understand, regardless of where you want to go in life, regardless of what you want to do, be prepared to work, be prepared to give, right? It's to me sometimes when I get not asphyxiated, but I get consumed by what I'm working on, right? And to
Mhm.
me, it's a long obedience in the same direction. I just keep marching down that path, marching down that path. And then usually there's an epiphany, right? The epiphany is, now I understand what I need to do more of. Now I understand how I can provide that to others. Now I understand what I can do to give. Um,
Yes.
and that's really the essence of it.
I like that. Now, you faced loss early in life, yet you built a mission around giving. How did adversity ignite, not extinguish your desire to serve?
So, I would say the concept of life is neither good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That was a
Yeah.
key component because I did suffer from severe depression. There's no doubt about it. We got no counseling. Nobody came and sat with us and said, hey, think about this or think about that. It was just life goes on. No mom and dad. And
Right.
I'll give you a primer of how much that affected me. We weren't wealthy. My grandmother said, when you turn 13, I'm going to give you a really nice birthday party. It's the only birthday party I've ever gotten, and outside of my wife gave me one when I turned 50, but the only birthday party I'd ever had in my life. And I went to bed from the time she told me that until that day thinking my mom and dad will be here. I've just been living this bad dream, and I'm going to
Mm.
wake up from this dream and mom and dad are going to be here. I mean, how special is that? But mom and dad never showed up. And at that point in time, I came to the realization, okay, this is life. This is what we deal with. I didn't cry anymore because I said crying doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything, doesn't resolve anything. And so I worked pretty hard to become an achiever, a giver. I stayed kind of that course, but things would happen outside of my control that would just send me on a tailspin. And
Yeah.
I would, my answer to all that was I would sleep. Why? Because if I sleep, I don't have to think about it. And my poor wife, thank goodness she's a reader because I would sometimes, no, sometimes I would sleep like 36 hours. I'd get up and eat, go right back to bed, get up and eat, go right back to
Wow.
bed. And so in my mid-20s, I came across a book by a guy named Martin E.P. Seligman called Learned Optimism. If you've got problems with depression, I would tell anybody, read the book. You can take the test online. They have it for kids now. He's a brilliant guy. He wrote this book because his father committed suicide when he was a young boy. And he went to school to say, I want to help people fix those
Yeah.
things.
Hmm.
So read the book. Thank goodness we didn't own a gun because I think the way I scored on the test was like, oh my goodness, I can't even bear to look at these numbers, right? I took his advice. And so he came right back to a basic premise I had thought about, but not really delved into self-talk. And
Yeah.
so my self-talk was what was debilitating me. And I learned through him to adjust that self-talk. And people will tell you after that, I was, and maybe even today they'll say, you're the most optimistic guy I know, right? I was doing training sessions at a company. I spoke to 23,000 people with these training sessions to help improve the company. And I got the catch title, he's Dr. Feelgood. And I thought that was pretty funny. I thought, well, I don't know if I'm Dr. Feelgood, but what I was doing was I was giving people hope and a resiliency factor if we can make this work. We can make this a better place tomorrow. We can do the right things. And so that whole concept of doing for others what no one else is willing to do was really a mantra during that time, right? You figure out what you can do for anybody, and they will love you for life. They will love
Yeah.
you for life. And that's where it becomes a hard line of being able to say no, right? And sometimes no is not the answer. I do believe yes is a more difficult answer than no, because yes requires me to be then
Yes.
there, present and involved, right? I now have to do something, as you know, every time you say yes, you have to do something, right? But so it's kind of that fine line, and that's where wisdom comes in. And I believe wisdom provides you insights and the ability to be able to say, no, I can't do this, right? It's the brother just older than me. I helped him. He lived beyond his means his whole life. I helped him financially. I helped him financially. And then I had 4 kids. And all of a sudden I said, why am I giving you the money? I've got kids that I want to invest in. I've got a future there. I've got things I need to do. And so I had to tell him no. And that was
Right.
a little bit of a shock for him. Still love him, still care about him, still willing to listen to him, still willing to help him, but just not monetarily, right? It just because it was just a black hole. He'd say he'd pay me back, and then he'd give me $100, and then he'd say, "Well, I paid you back for that." I said, "No, you gave me 100 of 1,000, and said you'd give me more." He goes, "Wow, I did give you money back." I'm like, "Oh, I don't understand that." I said, the bank's not going to take that. They'll just come and foreclose on your house, right? You don't get give anyway. I don't want to make light of that in that regard, but I do think there is that opportunity, and so it's really moving forward. What does that mean for us? And I do believe, if you're a giver, um, it's important that you also are able to look at the other side of the spectrum and you become a receiver. So there's
Yeah.
opportunities for us every day. I wake up every morning, my thoughts are around, God, what do you have in store for me today? Where can
Yeah.
I give somewhere, right? And again, that's a prime example. I was living in Jersey, actually. I lived in a place called Sparta. Neighborhood was beautiful. All the homes were set 75 yards from the street.
Mm-hmm.
Magnificent neighborhood. You drive through there and you think, wow, this is really cool, right? The first time you have to shovel that 75 yards from the street to your house, He said, this was crazy. I don't know what they were thinking when they did this, right? Because this is a
Right.
long way to shovel.
Yeah.
So I'm coming home from work in the evening, and I knew that the neighbor across the street, he was an executive. He was out traveling. We had talked earlier in the week. So it's trash night. We had to drag our barrels down to the curb. So I thought, oh shoot, I should take those in for Cheryl. She shouldn't have to come out here and do this. So I parked the car in the driveway, went down, put her barrels up at the front of the house. I started to walk back across the street. I lived on a cul-de-sac. There was just 6 homes there, right? And I
Yeah.
noticed somebody else's barrels were out, and I thought, oh, come on, man. Be a giver. If you're going to be a giver, right? Let's do it all, right? So I took their barrels up. Over the course of the next 2, 3 months, I do that every time trash day comes. If somebody's barrels are out, I take them up, right? We get together as a group of 6 couples for Christmas. And the big hubbub is who's the guy that's taking or who's the person taking in all the trash cans, right? And I'm like, who's the taking in your trash cans? Nobody's taking in my trash cans. Oh, come on. Somebody's never taken yours in. I said, no, nobody's taking mine in. I don't know what you guys are talking about, right? So I, I didn't do it for accolades. I didn't do it for, I just did it because I thought this is a value. Um, so, but I think I provoked enough conversation around the whole thing that people started watching. And so, honest to goodness, about 3 weeks later, I'm out of town on a business trip. And I call my wife that evening and she says, hey, guess what happened today? I'm like, what? And I'm thinking my kids, like, what happened, right? Somebody brought our trash barrels up. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. She goes, no. And I was like shocked. She's like, I kept asking the kids, none of you brought them up. No, no, no. So, and then 2 weeks later, I get a thank you card in the mailbox, um, and said, to the trash guy, we love you, right? And no, 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 no. And then a gift card. And I'm telling my wife, this is not why I did this. This is not, but this is what life provides to us, right?
Right.
Right. I'm out walking and I walk pretty regularly. I think I have pretty stringent habits, right? Because habits are a value and habits breed habits, right? So
Mhm.
I'm walking down the road here a couple weeks ago, and this girl's trying to change a flat tire. And, as I'm approaching, I'm thinking, oh my word, she's tightening the nuts. She's not loosening them. She's going the wrong direction. So I stop and I say hi. And she goes, oh, hi. And she's out of breath and she's all, ah. I said, it works better when you go the other way. If you go to the right, you'll take them off. You go to the left, they ain't going nowhere. She goes, what? I said, yeah, yeah. So then I walked over and she must have been working this one, the first one I tried, for a long, long time because I was stressing trying to get it loose. But I finally got it loose. And then I said, what's the other one you've been touching? Well, mostly that one. I got that one loose. And I said, see? She goes, oh, that is like amazing. I said, no, that's a fact of physical law, right? It goes on this way, it comes off this way, right? Um, so we both laughed a little bit about that. And I said, well, you want me to help you? She says, no, 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 no. I called my boyfriend. He's coming. But I'm so glad you stopped me and showed me that because she says, now I can feel really good I know what I'm doing, right? But I need him here. It's better for him to come and do it for me. I said, oh, okay. Well, enjoy your evening, right? And I just took off walking. So, but who would have ever guessed I would have the opportunity to have that kind of encounter, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just choices, right? It's
Oh,
time,
yeah.
energy, or emotions. And if you're willing to give the time or your energy, or maybe have to listen and become emotionally engaged in a conversation, um, it's priceless
It
because
is.
people don't get that most days, right? I used to tell
Yeah.
people all the time, I said, you come here to work and I want to make sure I give you what you don't get at home because you go home and there's no time for people to listen to you. There's no time. You got kids, you got dinner, you got this, you got that. You guys that work, you got things about work that plague your mind or things you're thinking about. And you got other responsibilities and things that you'd like to do. And you need some quiet time. So let me give that to you.
Right. I love that. I love that so much. Now, what have you learned spiritually and practically about how generosity creates momentum in teams and organizations?
I would say, I would say helping people become more effective at what they do, whatever that
Hmm.
is really, really powerful. And so I could stand up in front of any group today, anywhere in the world, and tell them emphatically, I'm going to share things with you that are so important, you can take them home and use them tonight. Friendships, social relationships, public civic groups that you're involved with, your family, um, you, everything I'm going to talk about. Oh, you can apply all these at work too, and they're valuable. But it's crazy for me to tell you this is the way you need to behave when you come to work, because the
Right.
chances are you're not going to do that unless you make it a habit. And you're
Yeah.
not going to make a habit unless you find it valuable for everything you do. And when you find those habits that are valuable for everything you do, those are gems that you'll never let go of, right? So we can talk about communication. We can talk about um, having to solve problem solving. We can talk about confrontation. All those things that I would talk about, everything I would say, all are about life wherever you go. And I
Hmm.
really did get people to kind of lean into that because they think, well, if I could get better at home, that would be cool. Yeah, and guess what? You'll see the practicality and the value of it, and you'll begin to do that at work more because you know it works. You know there's value there, right? So,
Exactly.
it's kind of the basic premise of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. When you
Yeah.
care for people, and that can be in a lot of different ways. It can be in taking in trash cans. It can be in giving them money. It could be doing an errand for them that they don't have the time to do. It can be sitting down and helping counsel or think through. Or there's times when I've had to just sit and listen.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. I'm sorry, but I
Hmm.
hear what you're saying and I agree with you, right? So I think there's, in organizations, it was very powerful for me to do that. Uh,
Yeah.
and and I met my son moved to Denver. I've stayed in touch with a guy that I worked with in New York City because I worked for Dean and DeLuca in New York for about 3 years. And so we've
Hmm.
stayed in touch. Well, anyway, recently I saw that he moved to Denver, and so I said, "Hey, my son's in Denver. When I go to see my son, you want to meet?" So I went up to help my son organize a new garage. He got it moved into a new place, and we put shelves and cabinets and storage bin. We did the whole 9 yards, right? But I went over and just had coffee with him, right? And I mean, how priceless is life when you can sit with somebody and he said, I think back when I was such a young kid and you just took time. And he said, you were so patient and you questioned me, but then you helped me see the answers a lot of times. And he
Hmm.
said, I'm here. And he's the president of a company today. He says, I'm here because of you. I said, don't kid yourself. Let's not say you're here because of me. I said, you're here because of what you did. He goes, but you were the help, the support, and give me and encourage and those are priceless moments in life. That's all I can tell you. That's
Oh,
all.
it is. It's so true. How do you balance the healthy profit with sacred generosity? Like, what metrics do you track to keep both of them thriving?
So, profits are a result of actions. That's all, right? And so, I, I, I think when people, as I said before, know you really care, they'll give you more than they would if they didn't think you did care, right? But
Right.
it's the gamut. It's knowing when to open the purse strings and dump some coins a person's direction. Money's not the answer, but
Yeah.
but it is a piece of some of the things you might consider doing, right? Um,
Right.
but yeah, profits are important. There's no doubt about it. That's what sustains the company. It's what helps it grow.
Right.
So you need profits, and everybody, some people would say it's a shortcoming on my part, but I was really an owner operator.
Hmm.
I worked whatever area of responsibility I had like it was mine.
Right.
All right, for the betterment of everyone. My goal in every company I ever walked into was to make this a better place so that when I left, people could say, we're better because he was here, right?
Yeah.
So that's a part of the process that you have to work through, and you have to be resolute in that, but you have to give. And so a lot of times, again, you have to give in ways that you don't plan on, right? The last company I retired from, we had, well, they still do today. We have 401k there. It's in the top 2% in the nation. You
Yeah.
as an employee put 9% into your retirement every week. We match 6.5. That's 15.5%. Anybody in the retirement industry will tell you if you're above 12, if you're at 13 or 14, that's nice. We were at 15.5%, right? That
Wow.
went into your account every week because we paid everybody weekly. You were 100% vested the moment it hit your account. You could quit tomorrow and that was your money.
Hmm.
So So that plan, when I took it over, was a profit sharing plan. The company was sold, and the new owners came in and said, Mark, if you could do anything to make this something was really valuable. I said, well, this is a really stay program. You do this and people will stay for the sheer fact that every week I get a 6.5% bonus.
Right.
No, it's a bonus, right? And I had some people that worked hourly that said, it's tight. I don't know if I can make ends meet if I do that. I said, here's what you do. You put the 9% in there, you get the 6.5. And if you have to take the 9% out, you're going to pay taxes on it either way, whether you don't put it in or whether you do put it in. So you then pay the taxes, but you got 6.5% week after week after week after week after week, which compounds, right? So
Yeah.
that account when I took it over was 23 million. Just before
Wow.
just before COVID hit. So January 1st of 2020, that account was at 83 million.
Wow.
97% participation in that account. Everybody in the company saw, what about you? What about you? What about you? So, so did that make the company more profitable? Absolutely. Because
Mhm.
everybody worked just that much harder to know that they're getting something week after week after week after week. And I'd have people walk by and they'd come by with their statement. They go, did you see this? I said, yeah, I look at it pretty much every day. It's a part of my responsibility, right? But
Mhm.
but but I think those are the things you have to kind of think through, right? The little things in life. Celebrating birthdays as a team, every month. Whose birthday is this month? Just and the periodic, I'm bringing in lunch on Friday. Don't bring lunch because we're going to cover it. It's going to be a good time, right? It's,
Yeah.
there's small things. I brought donuts every day to the company I worked at for the office staff. Not every day, every Friday, right?
Mhm.
And I'd have people walk by my office just sporadically. Hey, you know what? Thanks for the donut. I really needed that today, right? Okay, well, whatever, right? It's a donut. It's not a big deal, really. But
Uh,
but it's those small things sometimes that, if you think about, right? Uh, yeah. So, and I wrote thank you cards to people a lot, right? Because people don't get those anymore. You just
Yeah.
do, right? I got my stationery right here on my desk, right? And I write thank you cards periodically to friends and people and loved ones, just to say, I'm so thankful that you're a part of my world and you give this or you do that or you've done this or anyway. So.
That's wonderful. Now, with 4 kids and 11 grandkids, how do you cultivate a culture of giving at home? And how does that spill over into your work?
So I'll give this little caveat to everybody out there. If you have kids, I think I did a couple of things as a dad that, yeah, self-interest is a whole nother discussion we could have because I think self-interest is a driver for life, right? And
Mhm.
it's not a bad thing, but it
Right.
can be a bad thing when it's all about me, all about me, all about me. That's wrong. But when it's about you and me, that's good, right?
Right.
So every year I would write all four of my kids, and they have many of them, a thank you card. It's a handwritten card, and I would mail it to them. And my wife
Aw.
says, the very first one that got one, she says, you know how much grief that created? Everybody was like, how come she got one and I didn't get one? And then the other one said, yeah, and I haven't gotten one either. And the other one said, yeah, and what about me, right? And I said, due time, everybody's going to get their card, right? So um, I have today 4 cards. They sat on my desk for decades, one from each of my children thanking me for being their dad. I go back and read those, and it's a flood of memories. It's a flood of euphoria. It's a flood. They're all very professionally, vocationally successful. They're all well married in the sense this is their soulmate for life. They're all
Right.
disciplined. They're wonderful people. Um,
Mhm.
but but I find that giving is still a component piece. Now, this is the epiphany in life, right? They've now accomplished and arrived, and now dad doesn't have to buy all the time, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the standing comment in my family, and I only had to say, and they'd say, yeah, yeah, we know, Dad. And, did you enjoy this? I'd always say, did you enjoy this? And they'd all say, yeah, this was cool. It was great. Yeah, well, you should. It was free, right? Because Dad footed the bill, right? And so they all know the answer when I say, well, I know it's free, right? But But they pay now. They pay. But I do pay every year around Christmas. We rent an Airbnb because I've got a son in Denver, a daughter in Dallas, and two daughters in Virginia. So I rent a place. Everybody kind of we rotate. Sometimes it's in Denver, sometimes it's near Dallas, sometimes it's in the East Coast near Virginia. So we rotate it so that the buying of flights and all that stuff isn't so bad. And but I foot the bill for that week, right? And they'll fight with me now if we go out to dinner or I want to go buy groceries and they'll come running over saying, here's my card. Use my card today, right? So there's a blessing from that, and you can see the maturity in what they do and where they've gone. So, but yeah, it's important for us to stay together as a family. So, I have a picture every year of all the grandkids together. So this last year it was 11, a new addition the last year for Christmas, and so we have six boys and five girls. And so.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, which story in searching for father best illustrates the living starts of giving and why?
So I would have to say, in all honesty, they're all good. Howard Taslitz was a junior college professor, and I was working 6 days a week, and I was working nights, and his classes were only offered in the morning. But everybody told me this is really a great teacher, man. You should take this guy. This is really a great teacher. You'll love this guy's class, right? So I I had a penchant for history, most likely because my grandma told me all the stories of growing up and all
Yeah.
about the family and her grandfather and his migration from Texas to California and what that took and what it meant. And so um, I had this problem though. I would get into Howard's class and I would invariably go to sleep. Put my head down on my desk for a few minutes to just, catch a few winks, and the next thing you know, I was out, and somebody would bump me or somebody would hit my chair and say, "Hey, hey, hey, class is over." Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Then I'd get up and walk out. So I walk into class one day, and Howard calls me Mr. Mostenbach. That's kind of a Jewish New York slang, not rough, just Mr. Mostenbach. What are you coming to see me for today, Mr. Mostenbach? Right? So I walked into class and he goes, "Oh, Mr. Motsenbocker, we're all so glad you're here today. How you doing?" I said, "I'm doing fine." And I went over and sat in my chair. He says, "I've been thinking about you a lot." And he says, it just bothers me to no end to have you come to class and not be comfortable while you're here." And I said, "Okay." And he says, "Come up here for just a second. Come up here." So I walk up there and he says, "I think you show a lot of hard work and tenacity." He says, "I know, maybe this class doesn't, but I know you work 6 nights a week. You work all night, and then you climb in a car and you come here to spend time with me." And he says, "I want you to be comfortable. I really do. I want you to." So he reaches behind, it was a pull down map, and pulls out a robe and says, "Here, you need to put this on because you're sleeping back there, and I know you're not comfortable without a robe on, right?" So I put it on. The class goes hysterical. I put it on, and he ties it. "Make sure you tie that. I don't want you showing anything in there, whatever." I'm like, "Oh my goodness," right? So I tie it and I go back to my seat. So lesson learned: never fall asleep in Mr. Tassin's class ever again, right? So I mean, if I got to hit myself with pins and needles to stay awake, that's what I'm doing, right? But we
Mhm.
became very good friends. Very good friends. I would see him about once a month after I left school. Every 2 months or every 3 months, I'd stop by. I gave him Christmas gifts, and he would always say, "You don't have to do this. I'm not buying you anything." I said, That's not the point." I said, "I care about you and I appreciate you." And I bought him a pipe one year, and I thought he was going to cry for a second. Huh, yeah. I said, I don't know anything about pipes. I got to be honest. But I said, this guy I work with, his dad smokes pipes, and he invited me over. His dad told me, "Oh, go get this one. You got to get." He met with me. We looked at pipes. He says, I'd get him that pipe. That's a sweet pipe right there. So, and I think he was really kind of caught off guard because he knew that I had spent some money. And so he knew that I was working on my bachelor's and master's in history. And he said, when you finish, you come see me because I'll get you a job to teach here. Because that was my intention. I was going to quit my grocery job and I was going to become a full-time teacher. So I finished my degree. I got my credential, lifetime credential for the state of California. I went over and knocked on his door. I said, "Hey, check this out." And he was all, "That's exciting. You're gonna come here. You're gonna do some great things here. Let me tell you, son." Right? And I said, "Okay, okay, okay." So I got a call 3 days later from a secretary saying the dean would like to meet you for dinner. And I'm like, "Okay, but dinner will work, right?" Meet the dean. We sit down, we start talking. Now, here's how life works for those people that are givers. This is how it works. Howard gave the comments to the dean. Don Carvallis was his name, and said, "This kid will rock our world." Don says, "Howard thinks very, very highly of you." I said, "Well, I think very, very highly of Howard, right?" So he says, first opening question. So tell me a little bit about your life. Where'd you live? Where'd you grow up? So I started sharing my story about the death of my parents and then my grandmother. And then, I said, as a matter of fact, I said, my my dad was a pastor. He said, "Oh, what denomination was he with?" And I told him that. And I said, but my uncle, way more famous. He was a very famous pastor in Southern California. He was with the Foursquare Church. And when Amy Sample McPherson, who founded that organization, died, he stepped into her pulpit. So I said, my uncle Bert, is a very famous person. He goes, "Bert who?" I said, "Bert Tieford." You would have thought this guy, you would have thought I would, I had angels on both sides of my, he leans forward and he goes, "Dr. W.T. or Dr. W.B. Tieford, the Dr. Tieford?" I said, "Yeah, I don't call him Dr. Tieford. He's my Uncle Bert," right? He started laughing. He goes, "I went to school when he was the dean of the college. I went to that church for years while he was the head pastor. I followed him to another church when he finally decided to open a new church on the south side of Los Angeles." I mean, at that point in time, I could have been dumb as rocks and he was going to hire me, right? I mean, "You be sure and tell Dr. Tieford that Don wants him, and I'd love to connect with him sometime, and love if he comes into town, I'd love to take him and you to dinner." No, 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 no. And yeah, I filled out the paperwork the next week and I started teaching.
That's
Howard
wonderful.
Howard retired. I went to Howard's retirement luncheon. I was still teaching there. And I said in front of his two boys and his wife, "You were the father I didn't have. You were the dad. You were the encouragement. You were the wise man." I said, "You're priceless. I can't thank you enough." And the son came over to me later and said, "Man, you really touched us. That I know my dad's been a great guy. I had no idea he had done for you something like that." Right. So yeah, and he's gone, but what a great guy. Right. So that kind of, hopefully that'll answer the question about that. And the book's kind of like that. This may sound strange, but I would start writing about somebody and I'd start crying.
Yeah.
And I'd have to get up and walk. I'd just have to go walk. I have to get out of the house and get it off my mind for a few minutes because the emotion would just kind of envelope me, right?
Yeah.
Ah, what a great moment in time for me, right? It was just, and so that, anyway, but I think Howard's a great storyline.
That is wonderful. Now, from Biola University to corporate boardrooms, what was the one given practice that transforms mentees the fastest?
I would, so this is going to kind of sound funny because I was just reading this morning. I I mentor at my church, and I started a program. We have about 18 people in that program now. But I mentor at Biola College, and then I support students in the School of Business. They have to do a capstone program every year, and
Hmm.
so I support them by coming in and being a coach on their presentation.
Yeah.
And so this last year, you can't, but this is a thank you card. And it actually includes, I don't, nobody's going to see this probably, but it actually includes a thank you from every single one of the students. And,
Oh,
it's about giving guidance, giving support, telling stories, providing quotes. Um, the slogans you gave me are now on my bedroom mirror as a reminder, right? So uh, it's that kind of thing where I would say it hasn't really been much different, right? I have a student that was from the Czech Republic, and we FaceTimed for the first time. So he graduated this year, and we FaceTimed while he's in the Czech Republic to just stay in. He wants to stay in touch. He wants to, and he picks my brain, and he asks great questions. He's a bright young man, and gosh, if I can help him achieve what he hopes to and desires to do, um, I'd be a fool not to do that, right?
Right. Oh, I love that. Now, if listeners took one generous step today, what would move the needle the most in their lives and in their communities?
So I would say, because I only compete against Mark my whole life. I don't have to compete against you or anybody else. I don't have to be better than you. I just got to
Right.
be better myself, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, the whole thing is that you work to enrich yourself.
Hmm.
And so wise choices, because it's all about choices, are the
Yeah.
things that will enrich you. So I set goals fairly regularly, and they run the gamut from my ability to play a musical instrument to how much I read to how much time I spend with others to how much time I go and spend with my kids. Um, but I find that habits start in very, very small ways, and then they become incremental, right?
Right.
So I would say, you know, you need to conscientiously think every day, how can I give to one person today? Just one person. I don't have to do it all day. I don't have to think about it all day. But I got to be there to seize the moment so that this is my finest hour, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a process, right? But you'll find that as you ingrain that habit, it will become bigger and better and bigger and better and bigger, right? So I now have the flexibility and the wherewithal. I exercised for decades, right?
Yeah.
Walked usually sometime in the afternoon. Couldn't walk too far, too much because I sweat a lot, right? And I had to go back into work, right? But today I walk somewhere between 32 and 40 miles a week, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and so, my heart rate's way down, my blood pressure's fantastic, your health is one of the last things people realize super important. You
Yeah.
can have all the money in the world, you can have all the friends in the world, you can have all the things in the world, whatever you choose, whatever you want, here in America, above any other place in the world, you can have.
Yeah.
But your health is absolutely the kicker to longevity. So I tell people start small. Just start
Mhm.
small. And when I say start small, how can I give to somebody in my family today?
Yeah.
Just make it right there at home. Make it present. Make it people that you see regularly. How can I help with somebody at work? How
Hmm.
can I help with somebody out in public, right? I went through a phase for a while where I would go and buy gift cards to it's principally McDonald's because there were so many of them, or Jack in the Box, and if somebody was panhandling, I wouldn't give them money. And so, this is saying no.
Yeah.
I didn't want to give them cash to go buy drugs or go do alcohol. And maybe I'm wrong in thinking that way, but maybe not. I don't know.
Right.
So I'd give them a gift card and say, here, go get yourself a good meal, right? Um, those weren't random acts of kindness. That's not what I was doing. It was intentional acts
Hmm.
of giving, right? So there's a big difference between that. You can do random acts of kindness, and that's a great thing. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But intentional giving is specific and it's
Yes.
habitual. It's something that I'm going to do every day because it's what this world does for me every day.
Right.
And if I don't play with that as a core component,
Hmm.
I'm not everything I was meant to be because I do
Right.
believe we are. And and I don't like to get biblical with people. I don't like to get religiosity in this, right? But
Hmm.
Jesus said, for God so loved that he gave. A core
Yeah.
component to what people believe is the most important thing in life was giving. He gave the
Yeah.
earth to us. He gave life to us. He gave eternity to us. So those are choices, right?
I love it. I love it. Now, can you tell people a little about your book and where they can find your book?
Yeah. So the book, it's available on Barnes and Noble online, Books a Million. It's at Amazon. Uh, So they can buy the book there, and I'm working on trying to read it now, so I'm going to have an audio copy out there pretty soon. But you can, it's relatively inexpensive to get the ebook if you want to do that. I do say
Mhm.
on my website it's New International intl.co, or I mean intlco.com is the
Mhm.
site. I do say there, if you want me to come and share with your team, I'll give everybody a free book, autographed book. So that's about as far as I've gotten with gifts so far. But
Mhm.
I do say there, and I will say, you can tag me on LinkedIn, you can tag me on Facebook. If you tag me and you want to talk to me, I will talk to you. That's a commitment, and I'm not the kind of person that would say I will but don't. So
Right.
you got a question you want to ask me, I can answer that immediately. You want to have a brief discussion, I can do that. My site has 30-minute options for you to jump in there. And I've opened the calendar up. So, early in the morning, I'm an early riser, 4:30 this morning. That's my gig. That's just what I do.
Yeah.
Um, that first hour and a half, 2 hours of life is all mine. And I can spend it how I need to, where I need to, preparing for what I should be doing every day.
I love that. I love that. Now, if we had to take today's conversation and you wanted to emphasize some important factors, what are some things you'd like the listeners to walk away with and remember?
Yeah, I do want people to think about the fact that C.S. Lewis said you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And I love that quote, right? Because that is the hope, right?
Yes.
If you take Seligman's test, I would encourage you to do that if you have problems with depression, um,
Hmm.
and if you take the test, I would encourage you to think through that because there's a segment of that. It's called the hope score. And I actually called him. So this is back in 1997, 96. I actually got a hold of him on the phone. And I said, you say the hope score is probably one of the most important pieces of the whole assessment, but you don't really talk about it. He goes, yeah, it's a problem for me a little bit. He says, I have to really kind of wrap my head around what's hope for the general populace, right? And I said, well, isn't that just a better future, regardless of how you cloak it, whether it's spiritualism or Far East or whatever, however you want to do it. Everybody's
Right.
got hope. If there's no hope for tomorrow, he goes, yeah, 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 I got to work on that. And so then he wrote a second book shortly after that, not because of me, obviously, but he wrote a book, What You Can Change and What You Can't Change. And there he does a much, much better job extrapolating how important that is. So the nice thing about every morning is it's a moment of being hopeful for the day. And guess what? 9 times out of 10, the day provides those opportunities to give.
That's so true. Now, can you tell people a little about your services and where they can find you?
Yeah, so everything's on the website. And again, once you log in, you can see a little bit about my bio. You can see the book's on there, so you can click on the book. And then there's some other options that I offer on there to be able to come and share, speak, or help develop. Yeah, I can go so far as to say this. If somebody wanted me to come and help their organization, you pay my expenses for wherever I need to do to get there, to stay there, and get home. I won't
Hmm.
charge you anything. You can pay me what you think my value is. You just
Right.
pick a number, whatever you think that is, right? Because I'm confident in the material. I'm confident in the truth. And the
Right.
truth is what brings the reality to success.
100%. 100%. Well, this has been amazing, Mark. I thank you so much for coming on the show. I thank you just for being you. I love your wonderful heart and I love how you look at life. I hope that people when they hear this, it will really light up the light bulb and people will really look at their lives and maybe think about some of the things they could tweak a little better to make themselves a better person because I feel like in society, we still have a lot of wonderful, great given people, but we have a lot of selfish people, self-absorbed and, thinking about what's best for them. Let's say there's a snowstorm, everyone runs out to get
Yeah,
loads of bread and milk, and you go to the store, there's no more bread and milk. And people, sometimes don't think about others, they think about themselves. And
right.
if we could just stop and really think about, the importance of giving and how much of an impact that puts on somebody else. Even when you stop and you see somebody and you just compliment them on what they're wearing, that
Right.
moment that you just took to just say something nice to another human being can change their whole day and how they
Absolutely.
feel about themselves. I think we need to just stop for a second and really think about how we live our lives and about, maybe incorporating some more giving and less taking.
Absolutely. You're on. You're on. That's where it's, for me, that's where it's at.
It is, it is.
I,
And
I, I used to tell my kids, living the dream was one of my chant for maybe 2.5 decades, right? People would say, how you doing? I'm living the dream, man. Doesn't get any better than this, right? And my kids hit me up at dinner one night. Dad, why do you always say that? I said, let me tell you something. It cannot, could not, and will not get any better than this. And if it does, don't wake me up. I'm enjoying the dream way too much, right? So they,
I
yeah, they thought that that was pretty good. They said, you thought about that, didn't you, Dad? Yeah, I think about a lot of things, right? So, but it's true. Life is for living and love is for giving. And if you do that, boy, it's a better world. I can tell you that now.
100%. Oh, 100%. Thank you so much, Mark, for being on the show. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you as a person. And I thank you just for being the person that you are and for just helping make a better impression on the earth and the people around us and for just taking the time to really open people's eyes to a better way of living and behaving.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. It's been an honor and a privilege. So I appreciate your time so much as well. So thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You have a great day.
You too.